Hello, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all who have joined us so far. First of all, thanks a lot for joining in. A quick reminder to everybody who is joining us, please keep yourself on mute unless you want to ask a question so that we can minimize disturbance to the speaker. Uh, a quick thanks to everybody for having registered and joining us. Also, I would imagine that each one of us is working from home, considering the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think everybody is doing a good job by staying home, protecting yourself by virtue of social distancing, and we are trying to maintain as good a discipline as possible to protect ourselves, our families, and our friends. So thanks a lot for doing that. Uh, I would like to do a very quick introduction to the Institute of Engineering Technologies Mumbai Local Network. This is a brief introduction. I'll just take a couple of minutes to describe what we are trying to do, what we are up to for this year. And again, I would invite any ideas, any thoughts from anybody who's wanting to join IET or would like to know more about IET and connect with us in connection to any particular activities that we would do during the remainder of this year. So again, thanks a lot for joining us and welcome for this event. Uh, Talking very briefly about IT itself, so that's the committee we have. We have got a pretty wide range of people representing on the committee, including people who have retired to people to students. In fact, so it's a pretty wide range of committee members that we have. We have representation from the industry, we have representation from the academia, we have students, we have professors, we have senior professionals from the industry who are retired and actually helping us, guiding us, strategize and re-strategize, and as we deliver various activities and events, help us guide through various programs and activities that we do. Uh, as far as the Mumbai Local Network itself is concerned, we have focus around three major categories that you see on the screen: sector focus group, the YP initiatives, and the industry. Within the sector focus group, we have a very specialized working group which is led by Praveen Patil who is also our chairman, the chairman of the Mumbai Local Network, and he is driving the future of mobility working group within the IT. Uh, we are also trying to drive various initiatives related to artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and IoT technologies under the ID chain initiatives. Um, in addition, we understand and appreciate the kind of contribution we are expecting from the startup and innovators in India, and therefore we are actually looking at conducting various activities in helping startups either ideate, formulate, or develop their ideas from concept to commercialization stage. And we are looking at ways and means in which IET as a platform or IT Mumbai local networks specifically as a platform can support and help these startup companies gain what they want to. Under the YP initiatives, typically we have been supporting quite extensively colleges and academicians through various initiatives, programs that we have been conducting so far. One of the one activity worth mentioning is NICE, which is Nurturing Intelligence in Curious Engineers. Essentially, it's a competition run by IET Mumbai Local Network. It was conceptualized by the Mumbai Local Network itself. Now it's sort of being run across multiple South Asia region local networks, practically pan South Asia, and we are getting some very interesting traction. It's focused on trying to inculcate engineering mindset in younger children who are uh, at the stage where they make a choice of their careers. It helps them align their thoughts to choose their career. So the competition is basically around that, and it's structured around that. And we have been delivering this competition for the last more than 7 years. Uh, In addition to that, we conduct various short-term training programs for academicians in a variety of topics, and I'm quite happy to share some details subsequently. I'll be sharing some snapshots about those events as well. As far as industry is concerned, we provide a very strong connect with the industry. We try to provide a very strong connect between industry, academicians, and students all together. So events like what we are actually witnessing today, TechDais is a very strong platform, has been around for the last more than 8 years. TechDais actually, if you look at the topics we have covered within TechDais, it's a wide range of topics, starting from space technology to chocolates to what we are going to hear today around business ideas, impact on business, and so on and so forth. So I really encourage our members and others who are not members of IT to help us, join us, be a part of what we do, and contribute in every single possible way that you can for the betterment of the industry, for the betterment of our professionals, and move on and create a difference that we are actually aiming to do. Uh, in addition, we conduct various trainings and workshops. And again, feel free to approach me if there is any specific need or any specific requirement that you think IET can actually fulfill. And feel free to connect with me to know more about this. In addition, we have been conducting various site visits and excursions. Again, something that we keep sharing with our members. If there is any interest, larger interest from the industry, to share any experience or do a specific site visit or excursion, feel free to come forward and share your thoughts, and we'll be more than happy to include some of those ideas through our regular annual activities. Um, so that's a very brief snapshot of various activities that we have done. You can see a hackathon that we conducted a couple of years back. We conduct many such hackathons during the entire year. We do site visits, TechDais. These are the live sessions that we have done in the past. Currently, we have, for the last quite a number of events, we have been doing TechDais through webinars. And I'm quite proud to share that Mumbai Local Network is one of the first few local networks to embrace technology in a much more wider aspects, and being an early adopter of web-based tools to provide and deliver learning sessions. One that you're witnessing right now. Innovation and innovative approaches. We have actually had some interesting session about business excellence, using TRIZ as a tool for innovation, and various similar such other innovation and innovative tool-based approaches and discussions. And we have got experts from that side as well. Now, since we are witnessing a TechDais today, the topic managing business impact during pandemic. A brief background to this whole topic itself is, in the recent times, you must have heard the International Monetary Fund has declared that the world is already in a recessionary mode. Subsequently, we have also heard them say that probably India and China are going to be less impacted purely because of their own domestic demand, which is likely to spurt quite significantly going forward, considering the infrastructure development requirement that still needs to be addressed and work to be delivered within these geographies. So however, I personally feel that in the given pandemic situation, and considering that we are so very well connected economically globally, that it's hard to believe that China and India will remain completely isolated of the impact of the global recession. And that's the reason why we thought probably this might be the right time to get some brains pick on these ideas, and see whether we can try to help the industry to be ready as to how to manage the business impact, purely because what happens outside in the world is probably beyond the control of businesses. It's beyond the control of the business leaders. But what remains within their prerogative is how they respond to that circumstances. And I think that's what we hope to hear from Jayjeet today. Talking about Jayjeet, our illustrious speaker for today, I'm quite happy to have him talk about this topic. I and Jayjeet, I think our friendship, is based pretty 6 or 7 years ago when we actually were together as a part of delegation of US companies, and I had the fortune of actually hearing him out on a few things that actually he talked about, and the conviction with which he could speak about policy and so on and so forth was so impressive that I thought probably he was one of the best speakers that we could get to talk about today's topic. So with that brief introduction, I think we have already seen the brief that I have on my slide as well. With that brief introduction, I now invite Jayjeet to start his discourse. Jayjeet, over to you. Jayjeet, we are not
Sorry,
able
I was
to.
muted. I was muted. I was
Yeah.
just thanking you, Rajesh. I was also using so, and I'll use my screen and give me a minute while I get started with that and figure out technology. I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes, I can.
Great. So very good evening to all of you, and I hope you're all staying back in your home and following the quarantine process. We're basically going to talk about managing business impact during a pandemic, and we all know what we're talking about. We haven't seen something like this for a very, very long time. It's practically unprecedented that we have had such a dip in an economic activity and such an impact on human life, even though it does not cost lives, but the way our way of living has got impacted in an unprecedented manner. In fact, we have never seen such a large population of people on this planet quarantined at their home. At least 20 to 25% of the population on this planet is, as we speak, quarantined in their home, and that's completely unprecedented. And that is also having a deep impact on the economy of this planet, which is basically what we're going to focus on. If you look at the economic impact, it's at least 1/4 of business that will get wiped out. For sure, 1 month of business is completely gone. And we don't see much of a hope coming in the next 2 months. So clearly 3 months out of the year is going to get impacted quite severely as we move forward. And there are various scenarios that are being played out that will we see everything coming back to normal. And by normal, we only mean normal from an epidemic perspective, that will the epidemic be resolved or be cured of from this planet in the next 1 month? Or will it be that once the lockdown is taken out, we'll again see the epidemic coming back and again we need to have a lockdown? And there are various scenarios being played out. There are scenarios where after this lockdown is over, we'll slowly come back to normal. There are scenarios where there will be an up and down coming in terms of infection, and we'll have multiple lockdowns. We have a scenario where we'll have just one more lockdown and then we'll all be fine. And perhaps by the time the second lockdown happens, we'll have enough vaccines in place. We'll have enough vaccines in place to take care of the people, and therefore, as a consequence, take care of the economy. I have that the current situation that we are really facing is that matured business conversations have slipped out. Many of you have been in situations 2 weeks earlier where you were supposed to close a deal and that hasn't come through. And it could have been a deal in terms of either a sale or in terms of funding or in terms of investment coming in or in terms of you deciding to invest somewhere. And in a matter of few days, we are now struggling with our own liquidity rather than looking at investing into any other entity or even looking at getting an investment in. And that's been a dramatic change that has happened in the last week or so. There's been a significant supply chain stress in all our businesses. Clearly, we are not able to provide And this is not just for manufacturing, but it also holds true for services businesses. And the supply chain stress is both from being able to provide to our customers and also from us being able to get producers and products and goods from our vendors. And we don't know when the supply chain stress will get resolved. And I'll go deeper into it as we move towards the later part of the. Rajesh, there's a lot of noise coming in. Is there something I can do about it?
Yeah, I would just request people to mute themselves. I'm trying to find whose phone is unmuted, but because there is quite a lot of people who have joined in, I'm just finding it a little hard. So I request again all the audience to kindly mute themselves so that we are able to hear Jajit. Thank you.
Rajesh, as a moderator, you can actually mute everybody except me.
I am doing it actually. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Rajesh. So moving forward, as I said, there will be disruptions on both sides of business. That is providing the products and services as well as getting the products and services. And essentially, that's what a business is. We get some inputs, we do value add, and we send it forward. And we seem to be getting impacted on both sides. Also, one of the engines of any organization is the employees. And there's significant amount of employee stress. And I'll again come and discuss that issue in further detail when I come and talk about employees. But that's something that's really impacting many organizations. Also, in addition, there is obviously a large financial stress, along with it, a huge market cap stress. Industry after industry and company after company has seen a massive dip in their market cap, starting with oil and gas, which has seen as much as 60% market cap dip globally. I'm talking about to even automobiles and even pharmaceuticals, which was supposed to do well in a situation of pandemic. They have also seen a dip of about 30%, which is quite significant. So most companies and most industries have seen massive dips in their market cap, and that's something to be quite concerned about, especially if you're a company. What we also see coming out of this pandemic is new operating models that will be coming out. And based on the new operating models, new business models will be coming out. And that'll be quite interesting to watch and see, and therefore also note as to which companies are able to detect these operating models and therefore create the new business models and move forward and gain the competitive advantage that any disruption provides as an opportunity. So moving to the point of the issue of sales impact, and sales is essentially the reason why any organization, any business organization is there. And clearly there is a huge impact on sales. In fact, we have had no sales for the last 2 weeks in most organizations. And the sales is not in terms of just manufactured goods, but services as well, as I mentioned a little while ago. And the tragic part is that not all the sales is postponed. A lot of the argument is that, look, if you have lost sales now, it will come back. Well, if you're not buying an automobile now, we will buy it maybe 10 months down the line. But that's not true for everything. You know, if I did not buy cooked food outside in a restaurant, I'll not be going back 2 months later and buy double the plate because I did not have cooked food outside at this point. So much of the sales in many industries are just lost sales. They will not come back. But having said that, much of the sales will actually be postponed sales. And therefore, you can pick up those sales later in the year if you're in a position to do that, which also means that you need to be resilient as an organization and be around to pick up those sales. And by resilient, I just don't mean that you survive. What I also mean is that your sales team should be intact so that you're able to pick up all the opportunities that come by. And those are finer aspects that we'll talk about as we move forward in the talk today. And therefore, we need to also plan how we will be looking at different offerings as we move forward, because perhaps some of the offerings will change as we move forward. Now, unfortunately, demand will stay muted for offerings with elastic demand. And what are offerings with elastic demand? These are offerings which can be postponed or not had or substituted For example, the example of a car I was talking about, we can survive without buying a new car. And therefore, that will get postponed. And perhaps if the business environment is not good, people don't feel good about their finances, they may postpone their automobile buying for a very, very long time. But demand will become stronger for offerings with inelastic demands. Clearly, pharmaceuticals is an inelastic demand, but be careful when we generalize pharmaceuticals, because there will be components within pharmaceuticals which is not inelastic. Antiviral drugs will be inelastic, but drugs which are aesthetic in nature will be elastic in nature, and those components will not sell. Which is why you see that the pharmaceutical industry as a whole has had the market cap going down in spite of pharmaceuticals being considered to be an inelastic product. Similarly, when we're talking about elastic products, it's not that within an industry everything is elastic or everything is inelastic. One of the examples I'm putting out there is, for example, shaving cream will continue to be an inelastic demand. You would still like to have a shave no matter what the situation is. But will you buy a new razor? You might say, I don't like to spend right now. I don't feel good about my finances. I can live with my own razor, but I'll still buy the blades and I'll still buy the shaving cream. And that's where within the same industry, you will have a demand for certain products and you will not have a demand for certain products. You may not buy your automobile, but you will still buy the engine oil for the automobile. You'll also buy the gas for the automobile. So within the same industry, there'll be some things which are elastic in nature in terms of demand, and some things which will not be elastic in nature. And that's something that you would need to analyze for each of your businesses. Even in services, for example, if I'm into consulting, the corporate risk analysis or cost-cutting offerings will still be inelastic in today's world, where industries would like to do a consulting assignment on cutting down costs or in figuring out where else there is risk in the environment. But other offerings will not have the same demand, such as an analysis of consumer sentiment analysis will not be something that companies will be investing on as of now. And therefore, that's a exercise that each one of you would need to do for each of your organizations. And that brings me to employee stress. Clearly, as I mentioned, employees are the engines of any organization. And they're facing stress in terms of possible pay cuts, possible layoffs or fear of layoffs, or just fear of unknown. They just don't know where they're heading towards. In fact, many of the employees are even having existential crisis. They're asking, why are we even around? If a small thing like a virus is completely disrupting my life, my vision of what the world is, my vision of how the world operates is being disrupted by a small little thing like a virus, I will definitely have existential questions. And if the employee morale goes down, that's something that is of critical value to an organization. And therefore, one needs to make sure that the employee morale stays back for being able to claw back into a growth trajectory. Imagine if you have a demoralized employee dealing with one of your key clients. Now that employee may have been a star performer because before this crisis came in, but just because of this crisis, the employee is now highly demoralized. You can't see through that, but he or she is very lackadaisical when talking to one of your key clients who's absolutely key for you to bounce back in terms of your sales. How will you go and figure that out? How will you keep an eye on employees? How will you make sure that your employees' morale is up? How will you make sure that they do not have the anxieties that's perhaps driving many of them? Therefore, how do you do an employee outreach at this time? How many of you are actually having a town hall meet over Zoom the same way that we are having this particular conversations? Do we have any plans chalked out to be able to reach out to them and merely communicate that the organization is there for you, that you're not alone, that you're not just operating in a vacuum in your house and sometimes getting into these calls and talking to unknown people or perhaps known people, but the fact that the entire organization is behind them? Could we have a clear communication to all the employees on what the future path will be? how the organization will be responding, what are the steps that we'll be taking. If it has decided on a pay cut, are we announcing that properly? Are we communicating that in a stepped manner? And are we able to nip the FUD, the good old FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, which is getting into every employee? Are we able to nip it at the bud at this stage while they're in a lockdown, rather than thinking that, well, once they come back from the lockdown, we'll address those issues in a physical, face-to-face town hall manner and the old classic manner. In fact, as most of you will possibly agree, and most experts agree, there will not be any good old way anymore. The pandemic has changed the way in which we operate. We have, in a way, kind of settled down to operating from a remote area. Work from home has become the new terminology introduced by this pandemic. And therefore, the new normal has to be discovered, and we need to handle our employees through that journey of finding what the new normal is. And therefore, attempt to extend support to employees who are working from home. And then there'll be new questions coming up. Once the lockdown is over, once we are close to something called a new business as usual, questions will be asked that if employees are continuing to work from home, who pays for the bandwidth? Who pays for the electricity? Why shouldn't a part of my rent be picked up by the company? Because if the company is getting many of their people to work from home, they're also saving on office costs. Perhaps that should be picked up. And those are conversations that as organizations and as captains and leaders of our organizations, we should be ready to have those conversations a priori, rather than being thrust on us by our employees at a subsequent point of time. And are we reaching out with psychological counseling to those employees who need them right now and possibly would need them subsequently also once the lockdown is over? And clearly, it won't be a one-shot opening up. There will be stages of the lockdown opening up, and there will be uncertainties that all of us will be facing. It's not that any of us in this particular call actually knows how things will pan out in end of April or in May or June. And therefore, as leaders, we need to reach out to our employees and handle them in every possible manner, including psychological counseling. Are we communicating to them what are the support systems available from within the organization and from outside the organization? For example, the government announced a 75% withdrawal that can be done by employees from their EPFO funds. Do the employees actually know how to do that? Do they know where to apply? Do they know who to reach out to? Do they realize what is the consequence of doing that? Similarly, there is a construction and building workers fund at the state levels to an extent of rupees 31,000 crores, which is available to be given to workers in the construction and building sector. How many of our industries are really helping our workers in this sector to be able to reach out to the government and help their employees and workers get these benefits that are being provided by the government? And at the end of the day, as organizations, we also need to take hard decisions. If we need less workforce, if our business has reduced, if we have become more efficient, given the changes that have happened where we don't need people to travel, we don't need office spaces, then perhaps we will require less number of people. And if that's a decision we need to take, that's a decision we need to take, and that needs to be done and communicated with, and we move forward as quickly as possible for the benefit of both the employee and the organization. And that brings me to the next point on supply chain stress. As I mentioned, both goods and services are having supply chain stress. In consulting, we build up services supply chains where an entire job is done by multiple service providers. Similarly, in goods, as we're all familiar with, a car is not built in one factory. The windshield comes from one place, the wheels comes from another place, the tire comes from another place. And all of that is disrupted right now. So even if people wanted to buy cars, would the automobile industry be able to provide it because the supply chain is actually broken? So how do we fix the supply chain in a short time? Where on April 15th, we resume and lockdown is over. How can we start providing all of those goods and services and repair our supply chain in a very short period of time? In many cases where the supply chain was manned by migrant workers have gone back home. They will not be coming back anytime soon. They'll be waiting and watching as to how the pandemic situation actually pans out. And therefore, for quite some time, we will not have workers available to actually provide and produce the goods and services that are needed. So will we be able to actually go live on April 15th? It's a big question. And if we can't, what are the ways we resolve that issue? Can we actually step into further vertical integration? Can we go do a backward integration and produce some of the things? And can we actually reach out to the end customers directly rather than going through another set of value-added entities in the chain? And those are issues that needs to be looked at as part of analyzing how our supply chain is getting impacted. Also, there will be new concepts coming in terms of a safe supply chain. Is my supply chain virus-free? Are people who are providing me goods and services, or for example, delivering food at my home, how do I know that they're not infected? And not just with the coronavirus, with the new sensitivity of people, it'll be of all kinds of viruses, all kinds of bacteria. There will be new normal in terms of hygiene that people will be expecting. So are we in a situation to be able to provide a safer supply chain? Can we invest into creating a safe supply chain? And what about the big China factor, the 800-pound gorilla out there, or the elephant in the room? And I'm just punning because India is supposed to be the elephant. If part of our supply chain is linked to China, and clearly that supply chain is getting disrupted, what shall we do about it immediately? And what should we do about it in the long term? Time and again, we have seen our supply chains getting disrupted. When the floods came in a part of Thailand, which manufactured about 95% of all hard disks, it impacted PC production and server production for a very, very long time. And post the floods getting over and people coming back to business as usual, the supply chain got diversified and the production moved out of that place in Thailand. And it has now moved to multiple other regions. The same is expected to happen post this particular pandemic, where supply chains which are centered on China will clearly be moving out. Does your organization have a play in it? Are you prepared to go out and get some of that business? Or will that business still go to Vietnam and Indonesia and Thailand and other countries and not China? And China will, and not to India. And India will continue to be a land of potential opportunities, but the opportunities never happen because our companies and our organizations don't reach out and grab those opportunities. This is the time to actually plan out how do we take benefit from the opportunity coming out of China being questioned as the center of global manufacturing. Added to that, as part of the supply chain stress, we also need to reach out to our clients, specifically clients who are high value, who are high margin, who are critical for our survival, and who have been good to us, who have been our friends. We need to reach out to those clients proactively, share with them our plans, share with them what we plan to do on 15th of April and subsequently, share with them how we are going to keep them happy, and understand from them how their own requirements have changed post the pandemic. Post April 15, how will their requirements be different from what it was earlier? What are the changes we need to do in order to service our clients and our customers in a better manner? And similarly, reaching out to our business partners who are critical and assuring them that we will continue to have business with them and will continue to be a good business partner to them and will continue to uphold and respect the contracts. And if we can't, then having a conversation about all the arrangements that we've had with the business partners, with the clients, with the customers, and redraw the new relationship between each one of them so that we continue as one entangled, intertwined business entity and entwined with the clients, customers, and business partners. Which brings us to the lifeblood of any organization, which is finances. And financial and market cap stress goes hand in hand. And the loss of approximately 1 month of revenue with very limited reduction in costs, and specifically the fixed cost, is perhaps what's burning the midnight oil for most of us. We have been bearing the cost and will continue to bear the cost, but how do we make sure that we are able to get back the revenues with which we can pay for the cost? And if not, how do we fill up that hole where we, as a continuing organization, how do we fill up the hole in terms of funding so that we are able to continue to the next year and the next year and become a healthy, profitable organization again? And look at the magnitude of the issue. If just 1 month of sales has disappeared, that's 10% of annual revenues which have evaporated. And in addition to that, we are in a situation where we do not have the ability to forecast. We are not able to do the next quarter's forecast. Will we be able to bring back our sales to our previous levels? Or will we be just 5% below or just 10% below? What will be the sales in Q2 of the new year or Q3 of the new year? We just don't have the ability to have a much finer forecast, given that we don't know how the pandemic will be rolling out and how it will be panning out. And that also has an impact on our market cap, because if you're not able to forecast, the market will also be responding in a very erratic manner to our performance. And continuing on that topic, can you push your payments out? Is there a possibility that some of the payments that you have to do now, could you push it out so that you have a better cash management situation? And can you dip into insurances that you might have had, which is exactly what you need at this point in time? And if you can dig into all the insurances you have and figure out which ones you can really use at this point in time, because I'm sure some of the insurances may just be the right ones for this time. And above all, you can actually start borrowing cheap if you can. This is the time to actually borrow cheap. If you've seen the rate cuts from RBI, those cheap funds will be coming to you. Are you well positioned to take those funds? Do you want to take those funds? And what's your plan? Once you take those funds, will you grow with them? Will you use it to fill up the holes? That entire plan has to be put into place before April 15th happens. And that's something that we need to work on right away. And last on that is on the issue of financial market cap stress is reworking of contracts and agreements, specifically those which have temporal clauses, which is time-related clauses, that things have to be delivered or received within a certain period of time, or payments have to be done within the payment time periods. Can we rework those agreements or do something about it and have visibility to what those agreements are going to do to us as an organization? And that brings me to the whole issue of contracts and invoking the force majeure clause. Many of the contracts, in fact, I guess all of the contracts will have a force majeure clause. And I think we are in a situation where we can actually invoke the force majeure clauses wherever applicable. And also we need to handle contracts where the other party has invoked force majeure for contracts where they stand to gain by invoking those clauses. And in addition, managing contracts where you would not like to invoke the force majeure, but you would actually like to work through it and rejig it and work with your business partner to ensure that you have a new contract which can then be adhered to by both parties in the new normal that arises post the pandemic situation. And therefore, you would need to have a small army of legal folks who will then be working through these contracts and recreating them, or at least doing a deep dive and analysis of all the contracts you have, just to ensure that you are on a sound footing from a business perspective, and specifically managing the temporal clauses in each of these contracts. Which brings us to the issue of operating models. There will be new operating models that will be coming out of this pandemic. If we have been able to work for 21 days from home, and a lot of the work did get done, and many people have got comfortable with it, and you and I are talking over the same mechanism, why shouldn't we continue with that? Why should I burn more office space and more electricity and at the office and hire an office boy and multiple office boys and a receptionist and coffee, tea, and so on and so forth? I can simply impose a remote working from home, which also saves me commute time. It's a win-win proposition. The employee gains, the organization gains, and therefore can we start having a institutionalized remote work from home policy, which also means that can we bring in the discipline where there is a guarding of personal time versus official time, which implies that we don't get into late nights, work from home conversations, meetings, Zoom calls, and so on? And can the employee actually have the discipline of working during the working hours? And so those are new operating models that we need to put into place. We need to have a rostering process, because even on April 15th, if your organization opens up, would you want to have everybody in your organization coming down? People who are critical for your organization, if they fall sick and if they contract, God forbidding, any of the viruses, it'll impact your business quite significantly. And specifically teams which are critical for you, which could be the high-end support team, which provides support to some high-end systems. If one of them contracts the virus, the entire team will contract the virus. And therefore, do we put in some kind of a process by which the entire team does not come up, or some sets of entire teams don't come up? And can we make sure that when one set of people come to your office, the same set does not intermingle with another set of people who come in the next day? And therefore, this entire rostering system has to be really worked out in detail, so that you still have business continuity when April 15th happens and you go live, the quarantine opens up. You still are protected against the resurgence of the virus coming back and the pandemic coming back, because we haven't seen the future, because we don't know. And therefore, putting in those checks and balances and putting in those processes at this point in time becomes quite critical. The next issue within the operating model will be returning to business as usual. The big question will be, what is business as usual? As you mentioned, work from home, which became quite popular in the last 2 weeks, will become a new normal. Many things will become new normals. Your customers and clients will be more pliable to close a contract remotely rather than coming down and shaking the fabled hand. So you can and should be in an ability to actually close agreements with your vendors, with your clients, with your customers by working remotely. And therefore, could you try and impose that, and therefore even reduce cost of travel from one city to another, which will again become a win-win for everybody. And in my view, the new normal will actually be a much more efficient economy. Things that we were trying to do for a long time, we could not. In fact, one of the epochal watershed moments was when Melissa Mayers, who was the CEO of Yahoo, came back and said there will be no more work from home in Yahoo, which is one of the pioneers of work from home, along with HP and so on. And that was revoked, because what she thought and many other CEOs thought was that work from home doesn't work. But as we see now, the work from home is actually working. Many of our business has still been operating, albeit at a much lower efficiency, but it's been operating. And we have settled down with a much better infrastructure in place. We suddenly realized that even homes have got better connectivity. And although some of us are still having problems where we try and get into a call and sometimes the voice becomes squeaky, or some people are talking on the con calls, which are not related to the calls, and background noise coming in. All of that is happening, but that cultural change will change as we move forward, and that has already changed quite rapidly. So the culture required to be able to adopt the new normal of working from home, and the infrastructure needed to support the work from home is already in place. And therefore, that's where the business as usual will be a new business as usual as we open up the offices. And that will also mean that even if some of the workers work from home and others work from the offices at site, whenever there's an issue in the city, for example, we had a riot-like situation in Delhi a few weeks ago, there will be an ability to quickly respond and get people to work from home. In fact, my fear is that some of the organizations may impose work from home on national holidays like 15th August and 26th Jan, because the offices can stay closed as per the regulations, but people can still continue to work from home and have business as usual. The new operating model would also mean reduction in manpower. As I said, we'll become more efficient, and one of the outcomes of efficiency is that in the existing organizations, there will be a reduced need for manpower, and many of this manpower will probably move to a gig economy, which is the new normal which will be coming in, where just like we have been using workforce who have been independent, who have been getting on to us for a day to day, helping us out in our back-end processes, in probably supplying food to us and so on, and then disappearing once that gets done and getting to do another job. So the gig economy and the work from home becomes a new normal, and more of that will come up as we move forward. And therefore, based on that, new businesses will be coming up. And if some of us are able to fine tune our organizations to be able to ride on the new business as usual that will be emanating, we will be far more competitive as we move forward. And that's something that all of us should be planning as of now. Which takes us to the issue of new business models. So the new operating models will lead us to the new business models. For example, we can actually have tertiary care at home. Why are we filling up the hospitals? So in case of coronavirus, if we can have the ventilator at home and a few AI-driven instruments, we can actually take care of the patient at home where he or she is far more comfortable, and we can quarantine the person at home itself and be able to provide a much better facility than the crowded, infection-prone hospital that we might take the patient to. Similarly, why can't we have high-quality conferencing systems at perhaps airports rather than letting people actually fly down? If we are comfortable having a poor quality video conferencing facility, which we are having on our own PCs and laptops, what if we have very high definition videos where people actually look as if they're in front of us, put it up in specific places, and instead of people flying down to another city, they can simply drive down to these centers, get their teleconferencing requirements done, and then drive back home rather than taking a flight to another city. And there will be a zillion such business models that will be coming up. You would need to look at your value configuration, your competencies, your infrastructure, your partner networks, your target customers, and your service capabilities to be able to actually come out with these new business models within the industries that you are at, so that you can create these adjacencies without really stressing your organization and having very incremental changes, leading to a sustainable competitive advantage that you bring in. That also takes me to the issue of vertical integrations arising due to supply chain disruption. If your partner is not able to provide to you, can you actually get into whatever the partner was doing and get into vertical integrations? In the current situation, we'll be doing it as an emergency measure. But once we do it as an emergency measure, we actually have the capability to drive down that kind of a business model and be in that space in a sustainable manner. Similarly, new technology-driven business will coming in. For example, we still don't have a tool. I mean, we are using Zoom, but do we have a tool which has the power of Slack, has the power of Zoom, has the power of shared directories? Once this call is over, you will not be able to see this particular presentation unless I mail it to you. But if there was a shared directory, you could have seen it straight away. And can we still have the good old obsolete email system also part of that tool? And can we have digital signatures as part of the tool where I can simply sign the document while I'm talking to you and we're done with that business conversation? And so there will be essentially far newer sets of technologies that will come in to actually make us completely business enabled on a tele work from home mode or tele work from office mode for that matter, where we don't really need to travel quite a bit. In fact, for a long time, there has been a philosophical debate that there is a race between communication and transportation. And if communication wins, you don't need to transport yourself that often. But if transportation becomes cheaper, better, more sustainable, then perhaps you can just take the transportation and not have communication. But clearly, from the experience that we're all having, we believe that communication is winning, and we believe that's good, given the fact that we see the birds coming back to the sky is getting bluer, the pollution levels in the cities have come down dramatically. For the first time, we are having a good quality air, at least in Delhi, which I'm tracking. In the last half a decade, we have never had good quality air at this time of the year. And we are seeing all of that, and that's the benefit of us not driving our motor vehicles around. Which also takes us to the point of having the issue of zero-touch business. Given the new hygiene sensitivities that will be coming in, can we create models which are zero-touch businesses? For example, as simple as not providing and paying in cash. Can we wave two phones and make the payment. Those are the kinds of new business models that will be coming in, where there'll be essentially zero touch interactions between people. There will be need for micro community support systems, where small communities would need their own technology systems to support themselves, which will be different from the ones used by corporations, which will be different from the ones used by NGOs, which will be different from the ones used by the governments, and so on and so forth. And so there will be new home delivery systems, possibly virus proof, bacteria proof, and those could be slogans and opportunities that you can look at, which will actually propel you to a leadership position in your own industry. And therefore, that brings me to the opportunities. The big first one is you can now borrow cheap. There is cheap funds coming in. So instead of getting scared, one can actually start looking at your own balance sheet and financials and see if you need money and if you should have money, and therefore what do you do with the money if you're getting the cheap money. Again, along with the cheap money, what you can do with it is actually acquire new businesses. Businesses will go cheap right now. There will be many businesses which will be close to going belly up, and there will be very valuable businesses with very valuable capabilities, or they might just be your competitors. And if you buy them off, you will be consolidating your position in the market. So this is a time of opportunity from the perspective that you can actually strengthen yourself as we weather the storm. And in a similar tone, you can actually go ahead and acquire new technologies. They will be coming in cheap at this point in time. And if you wanted to make that leap and become technologically advanced, this is possibly the right time to do that. And that will enable you to gain competitive advantage. There's also a time to reduce cost of capital, to restructure your capital. You can retire some of the high cost debt and go back and borrow some of the cheap debt that's available. And you can also look at new markets opening up, new markets for products, as well as new geographical markets opening up, both within India and outside India. And I already talked about the China Plus strategy. Can we start attracting many of the manufacturing and many of the businesses that was there in China and that is looking to move out of China to come to India in a competitive fashion? And so these are all opportunities in this pandemic that has broken out. It's not all gloom and doom. If we plan properly, we can actually come out much stronger out of this pandemic that has broken out. So now, therefore, the question is, where should we start? Saying all of it and the theory is all good. What do we do immediately? There needs to be put up a coordinating body. I would like to call it a war room that will possibly work with the CEO and address the immediate challenges. And immediate challenges I already talked about in terms of human resources, in terms of reaching out to customers, clients, business partners, investors, everybody. And then address the near-term challenges, which includes your cash management. Do you have enough cash so that you don't go belly up? Do you have the protocols to take care of future lockdowns? Do you have a safe environment protocol so that you don't end up having your entire organization getting infected, God forbidding if the pandemic breaks up again? So what are the protocols that you'll be following so that your employees feel safe and you continue to be in business? And what are the steps you'll be taking to returning to business as usual? And what will be the new business as usual that you want to return to? And envision these new processes and new businesses. And this is what needs to be done immediately. As part of that, you will analyze and implement in the dimensions of employee outreach, which I already talked about, the financial rejig, cost cutting, customer and client outreach, managing the finance, figuring out the new operational models, figuring out the new business opportunities, figuring out the new merger and acquisition opportunities, going deeper into competition analysis and keeping an eye on what your competition is doing. And finally, also reaching out to your investors and making sure that they are happy with what you are doing because you are the custodians of their investment. With that, I come to the end of my presentation and I'm open to any questions that you may have. So thank you. Thanks for patiently listening to me.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jaji. That was a fantastic presentation. I think you really put multiple pertinent issues to the table over here for discussions. I would request professionals to unmute themselves and ask the question directly to Jajit. In the meantime, maybe I can start with one small question I have for you, Jajit. You mentioned about an interesting thing about China as a potential, place where India can have a significant play and actually start leveraging benefit out of the fact that Chinese economy actually is going to be hurt quite significantly, and people will start seeing risk of putting all their apples in the same basket by investing in China, or having all their supply chain based out of China. Uh, in your view, what are the policies and regulations that India needs to make changes to, which will actually skyrocket our ability to partially replace what China is doing, so that then we can become a second major hub for supply chain? Is there something that we can do differently, or something that's already been done, which you can actually put forth over here? Thanks.
Yeah, so good question, Rajesh. That and you have been in the industry and you're aware that this is not the first time that the China plus one question came up. Multiple times in the past, the China plus one question had come up, and unfortunately, that plus was never India. It was Vietnam, it was Philippines, it was other countries, and the reason obviously lies in the ease of doing business that exists in India, as well as the capabilities of Indian organization. Now, many of our organizations are absolutely world class, but when we're talking about India being one of the key destinations for manufacturing, it is not that a few select organizations needs to be world class. It's a whole the middle part of the industries that needs to be world class. So we need to actually pull up our socks and attempt to be world class than be what we typically call as jugadus. But also along with it, I think many of the organizations need support from the government, as you rightly pointed out. The government in the last 4, 5, 6 years, in fact, has been working on ease of doing business. And Rajesh, as you're aware, I was personally involved in the first attempt to do ease of doing business. For 2 years, I was involved in it very, very deeply. Although we made much progress, but much more needs to be done, because we had a whole bunch of shackles that were shackling the industry. We need to accelerate the ease of doing business. There are many hindrances in plain and simple exports. Ability to invest outside, ability to even send $100 check to form a company in Singapore. It's just nightmarish to do it. And so these are the rules that needs to change. If somebody from UAE has to invest, they can actually swipe a card and make an investment of $10,000 and they're done with. In India, you have to go through loopholes to make that same investment. I think those are the changes that needs to be done on a very urgent basis if we really want to be a credible global player. And I think the foreign exchange constraints, the constraints to invest, and post that, our supply chain constraints, our ability to have factories near the ports and near the airports, all of that needs to be worked out in a much more intense manner than it has ever been done earlier, Rajesh.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a fantastic response, Jajit. Any questions we have?
Yeah, Jajit, this is Shekhar here.
Hi, Shekhar. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, this is, as usual, a great talk from you and very insightful. Thank you very much for doing it. As you know, I mean, most of the people here are IT members, and so you are also intricately involved with the IT. One of the things that I worry about from the IT's viewpoint is that the IT's whole model is based on meeting people, getting in touch with people, working together as volunteers. Now, with this whole new pandemic coming in, with touch, physical meetings going away, networking going away, what is the way that the IT should look at reinventing itself?
Right, Shekhar, as I mentioned in my talk, that the new normal will be moving towards zero touch, right? And zero touch does not necessarily mean that there will be no networking. Zero touch does not mean that people will not be interacting with each other. It merely means that we'll be interacting in a very different manner. When you and I are talking, and most people are all engineers, I believe, in this particular group, all that we're exchanging is information. And as per Shannon's theorem, we can exchange a whole bunch of information on the existing channels that we have. So what is that we're losing out? We're losing out in terms of communication that happens when, which are non-verbal in nature. For example, if I'm twiddling my thumb, you can't see that, right? And that kind of communication is also important. We also just need to, as humans, see each other face to face. Now, when we're talking about the new normal and zero touch, we're not saying it'll really be zero touch. What we're saying is that the number of touches will reduce. It is actually a reduced touch environment that we'll be getting into, because people will still have to meet some point in time to just get a feel of each other, to see the compatibility, because still, at the end of the day, business is quite emotional. When you do a sale, it's first an emotional sale, and then the person buys and finds his own rationale as to why he or she is buying. But the sale actually happens as an emotional sale. And, and you can't really do an emotional sale on a remote basis, not yet, unless you have products which have high information content. For example, if you're selling a CD, you can actually define what the CD has. It has this kind of a music, and there's so many minutes of music, and there's the album that the CD has, and you exactly know what the CD is about, or a book which can be defined with all the information. But if you're selling other products which needs to pick up the cues from the client or the customer, where you're actually doing a solicitation, then you need to see these cues which are beyond verbal cues. And therefore, in those certain situations, you actually need to go down and meet up. But many of the conversations and many of the business interactions can actually become zero touch, while some we can't avoid. So it'll be a new normal, but it'll not be that the pendulum has swung from one end to the other end. It has just swung. That's it.
Yeah. No, so one of the things that I think we'll have to be careful about as we move to this new set is that a lot of business conversations also have got this whole outlying layer of banter, which happens. And one of the things that we have to be careful about is that as we move to this zero touch or this new normal, we don't lose the art of banter, which also builds relationship. And does not get very transactional. And I think we will go through that trough when everything will be very transactional before we start realizing the digital banter, so as to say, across screens.
So Shekhar, I'll just take a few more minutes to put my observation into what you said. I would absolutely tend to agree with you, as long as it is you and me and people of our generation. But then there is a new set of people joining the workforce who have been forever, as we had said, digital natives. They have been brought up on video games and Facebook and Instagram, and they're completely comfortable working digitally, doing their homeworks digitally. So perhaps you and I might find a challenge, and I still have to come down to your office and have a cup of tea and banter. But perhaps the next generation won't have to do that.
Yeah, possibly. Very true. Thank you so much, Jajit. Thank you for the wonderful talk, and thank you for answering my question. Thank you very much, as usual. Great.
Right. So, Jajit, we have got a few questions on the group chat as well. Imran Khan is asking, what will be the impact of this pandemic on infrastructure projects in India, mainly on railways and metro projects?
I don't think that in the in even the near term, there will be much of an impact. Infrastructure in India is sacrosanct. The last decade or so, it has been treated as sacrosanct. In fact, why last decade? I think for the last 2 decades, infrastructure has been quite sacrosanct, starting from around 2000, beginning of this millennium. So I don't think infrastructure will get impacted, especially when we're talking about government-driven infrastructure. So projects of Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, I don't think they'll get impacted. Projects coming from Ministry of Civil Aviation, the airports that were supposed to be built up, they will continue. In fact, they will get accelerated, because that is the way in which the economy can be brought back on its feet, and we can start putting money back in the hands of workers. So if we don't have new airports coming up, we won't have money getting into the hands of the workers. So I would not be worried that the infrastructure projects will get hit, especially because I think nobody is now bound by the fiscal deficit, the Fiscal Discipline Act, the FRBM Act, wherein we had to stay within that 3.4% of fiscal deficit, 3.4% of GDP as fiscal deficit. I don't think we will have to adhere to that, and we just can't adhere to that anymore. More money has to be pumped into the economy. The $25 billion that was announced by the finance minister is just the first bit that is being put in. There has to be substantially more money flowing into the economy, and the point is, how will that money flow in? That money has to flow in through large projects, and therefore I would not be worried about infrastructure projects getting hit in the short to medium term.
Right. I think then there are a couple of other questions. Supurna Datta asks a similar question about the impact on transportation sector. I think I would imagine railways and metro is a part of that, and that's sort of answered as well. Naveen Arora is asking a question, looking into such unprecedented situations, what kind of new disruptions can come into existence in terms of business opportunities?
Yeah, Naveen, it's curtailed by only your imagination. As I mentioned in my talk, there are a whole bunch of innovations that will be coming in. For example, what I was discussing with Shekhar a little while ago, the millennials will like to operate in a very different manner from how you and I operate. And therefore, we need businesses and systems and processes to manage them. And whenever there is a new thing to be created, we need that's a business opportunity that will be coming in. I also strongly believe that more of robotics will start coming in. How do we do food delivery? It's not no more a question of delivering in a cheaper manner and removing people. It's a question of how do we do delivery in a much more predictable manner, and that's where you'll have robotics coming in. How do I clean my drain in a much more predictable manner? In fact, I've been writing the India Vision 2035 for Niti Aayog, where I put a few caselets where one of the caselets was a blue-collar worker actually gets up and starts cleaning the drain in NDMC by sitting out of her home, because she enables a snake bot which goes into the drain and cleans it up. Now, it looked futuristic when I was writing it 2 months back, but now it doesn't look very futuristic. Somebody will be investing and getting that done, because you don't want bacteria and infection and other kinds of diseases to come out of those drains and infect everybody else. So there will be a plethora, in fact, I would say an explosion of innovations that will be coming in, triggered by the changes that has happened, not just in the way we work, but societal changes, cultural changes, and changes in terms of how we all interact. So that's going to give us a whole bunch of opportunities.
Right. I think looking at the Zoom chat window, there are a few questions pertaining to this one. You mentioned about utilizing bots and AI, ML, and so many other stuff. That's likely to free up a significant quantum of human capital. How can companies actually help their human resources to unlearn, learn, and relearn over this period of time? Actually, how do you see that pan out?
Yeah, no, it's a challenging issue. I think for people in this group, it will not be difficult to learn, unlearn, relearn, because we have the basic education and the luxury of having that basic education to be able to learn and unlearn and so on. I think the challenge is with the larger people outside of this group who did not get the opportunity to even finish their school or even do their primary education, and many of them actually being illiterate. And they're the ones who will get hit, and they're the ones who really got hit in the pandemic that happened now. And this includes the migrant workers. This includes people who can't even reach out and get government help. At one end, the government is trying to help them out, but you need to have the basic ability to reach out your hand and get that help, and that is not there. Moving forward, and what we've been predicting for a very, very long time, one would need to have a far more educated society, so that as and when the workforce requirement changes, the society can restrain, reskill, rejig, and become economically relevant again. As of now, a large portion of our society actually contributes economically in a manner which is not much different from how a bull or a horse contributes to the economy, which is essentially muscle power. That's quite shameful. We have squandered away decades and decades by not putting up a good education system which is equitable to everyone. A few lucky people who are part of this conversation that we're having has had the opportunity to get the education, but the rest haven't. And so the question that the gentleman asked is a much deeper question, and it's a much more challenging question. And we as a nation needs to quickly get into the act and make sure that that everybody, and not just a large portion of the population, but everybody gets well educated, so that we are able to have the benefits of the demographic dividend that we have, of a younger population that we have. So as a younger population, we will probably weather the virus better. But post that, what? If we don't need as many people, we will end up staring at a civil issue, at riots breaking out. And that's something that we need to work on as a nation very, very quickly.
Right. So, Jayji, probably I'll ask this as a concluding question, since we are already 10 minutes above time. In your view, considering that, Prime Minister's vision about India is to reach a $5 trillion economy pretty soon. Based on where we stand today, considering that today what we are witnessing is already the future of work. We have already embraced new ways of working. We have already been compelled to embrace new ways of working. And I think it's just already putting us in a significant learning cycle right now, as we talk about making sure that we are able to work, we are able to deliver our duties as diligently as possible in the given times. What is your view about the way we are changing ourselves to work? Are we going to meet the $5 trillion vision that the Prime Minister has? And is this the way in which we can do that? Or does India need to think of much, much bigger, different ways of approaching, considering that we still have, as you rightly said, a significant population which works like horses and bulls. They bring in their value through the muscle power. So how do you see that pan out for businesses, and what can be done to address that in a shorter period of time, considering the kind of vision we have?
So Rajesh, if you look at the historical data, we have anyways been growing 1.5 times every decade. So our economy has been growing 1.5 times with business as usual every decade. So we are roughly 2.6, 2.7, or roughly, let's say, $3 trillion economy. So reaching $5 trillion by 2025 should not be a big challenge unless we goof up. There will be, under business as usual, last time I calculated, there was a shortfall of about $800-900 billion in terms of GDP. And if we can just get our act together, we can cover up that shortfall and reach that $5 trillion goal that our Prime Minister had set. And for that goal to be achieved, clearly we need to have a larger per capita income, which can come in only if we have a workforce which is more productive. And that can only come in if the workforce is more skilled and more educated. And therefore, we need to start processing our raw material, which is our human resource. And we are in a strange country, where we have one of the best human resources possible, akin to having rough diamonds in place, but we pick up the diamonds and just throw them in the ocean. We don't really process the diamonds. And if we don't process the diamonds, there's no value that's going to come out. A rough, uncut diamond has the same value as granite. And that's exactly what's happening. A GDP does not come out of the minerals that you have or the gold that you have. It comes from the people that you have. If you look at the couple of largest corporations in US, it's Apple, Google, Facebook, and so on. And if you just add up their market cap, it is much larger. If you just take the first three, it is actually larger than the GDP of India. And all of those three, the Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, and in fact 4 or 5 that I'm mentioning, are all innovation-led companies. So it is innovation that has created value. But if you don't have the human resource to do the innovation, then I don't think we'll be able to gain a higher productivity, or therefore higher per capita income, and therefore able to reach the $5 trillion number and fill up that gap of 800 billion that I was talking about. And as it is, forgetting about the $5 trillion, it is our duty to make sure that every citizen in this country has a good lifestyle, which means that they're productive and productively engaged in the economy.
Yeah, wonderful. I think with that key takeaway point, I think that we need to innovate, we need to be creative, we need to embrace new ways of working, and move forward to contribute to the economy to which in a way which we can, and try to do it in the best possible fashion. I think with that thought back for everyone, I really thank Jayjeet for doing such a wonderful presentation and responding to some wonderful questions. I also thank everybody who has attended this call today. Hopefully everybody has learned a lot, and we have gained quite significantly from today's discourse. Hope to see you again pretty soon with another edition of TechDais and Genesis Tech Talk. You all have a good evening, good afternoon or morning, and please get back to your work. Thank you very much.
I have one question, sir.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
No, Biju, we are just getting out of time now. Please type it back to me or write it to me. I'll post it to Jayjeet now. Okay?
Okay. Can we get
much.
the recorded video session?
I will be sharing that. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Bye-bye. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.